Good evening. I hope that your day has been great. I wanted to go ahead and finish chapter 7 so that we can start on chapter 8 next week, hopefully. Okay. I know we covered a lot in class, but there are just a few more things that I want to go into a little more depth about so that you will have it. I would encourage you to please read this and do not please finish the chapter and read over the information. But I wanted to go back over those spiritual development. There are three dimensions of that. We talked about cognitive, and that's the beliefs and the values and the perceptions and meaning related to work, love, and life. So it's how you think about work, how you think about love, and how you think about life, or your perceptions of how that would be at young adult age, at that stage of young adult. And then the next we talked about affect, and that is the sense of connection and support. Those attachment and bonding experiences that individual have, and again, that's also related to those areas of development: work, love, and life. How do I connect with people? How do I support? How do I show up? As a young adult, and these are the dimensions that are that should be in some sense of the spiritual development of a young adult. And then we look at the behaviors. Behaviors are those things that people practice, or those rituals or those behavior experiences that an individual have when it relates to their spiritual development. And we sometimes we repeat behaviors, and unfortunately, young adults sometimes have behaviors that could be healthy or unhealthy. So just remember that. I think it's important that I go back over that with you so that you will feel comfortable with that. And we talked about the different types of faith and making sure that you understand that. But at this stage of development, there's a high value on spirituality. People just believe in spiritual, and we talked about religious versus spirituality. So I want to move on that. And again, if you have any questions after listening to this and you're taking your notes, we can discuss it, or you can email me. Okay. Our next topic of discussion is going to be identity development. And we talked about this a little bit in class, but your development is ongoing. I mean, we're constantly changing, we're constantly evolving. And Marcy, I want you to remember this because I don't think I covered this in class. There are 4 stages of Marcy's stages of identity formation, and you will need to know them. And you can either be it's 4 of them. The first, and now we're talking about identity and development, how you see yourself. Are you open? What's going on? Are you closed? Do you explore? And we know from our previous study that all has to do with how you see yourself and how you grew up or what someone said to you. So again, it's ongoing. There are 4 stages of this that I think are important. This is by Marcy, okay? And she says that formation in terms of the level exploration and commitment to those values, beliefs, and goals. So we have some young adults who are diffused. There's no exploration, no exploring, no commitment. They just, they may do things, or they just kind of stuck to where they were when they were growing up. They don't venture out. There's no, they don't explore anything else. There's no commitment there. They just kind of, they exist. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but, there's no commitment to a particular identity. Okay. Well, that's um, there. And all of this is influenced by how they see themselves and their self-esteem. Okay, diffuse. That's no exploration, no commitment. Then you have foreclosed. And we're not talking about houses or anything. We're talking about there's still no exploration, there's no commitment. They're just kind of It's just there. There's nothing. And then you have moratorium. And that's where, people may explore different identities, but they're not committed to anything. There's, you know, they may explore different forms of identity, but they're still not committed. And just remember, the young adult sometimes often abandon their own insular self. They may no longer be the self that they once knew. So diffuse, no exploration, no commitment. They're just, foreclose is similar to that. But foreclose says there's no exploration. Excuse me. Ooh, excuse me. Foreclose said they don't explore, but they're committed to whatever it is that they identified early in age, but they don't explore anything else. They're foreclosed, okay? But there's a commitment to that, but there's no exploration of anything different from what they identified early in life. And then there's a moratorium, and they explore, like they get out and change and may consider a different identity, on a different identity based on different things, what they believe in. But with them, there's no commitment. Even though they're out there exploring, there's no commitment to that. Okay. And then you have achievement. That's an individual, I would say that they're comfortable who they are, they explore, and they're committed to whatever it is that they desire to be. They're, with their goals, their beliefs, and their values. They value life, their life values, their beliefs and goals. You know, it can change, but those individuals who are at achievement stage, they've explored, and hey, they're committed to their goals and their values and their beliefs. Whereas there's some students, again, diffuse. There is no exploration about beliefs, goals, or values. There's no commitment. It is what it is. And then you have foreclosed, well, they're individuals, they don't explore, but however, they are committed to those values and those beliefs and goals that they once knew. And this is what helps these stages of development, identity formation, is what actually help young people, young adults, to make adult commitments possible. And then you have the moratorium. They explore their different values, their beliefs and goals, and they may look at it, but there's no commitment to changing from what they once knew, but they may, venture out. And again, we have achievement, and that's where they explore. There's a commitment. And so there's a commitment to whatever it is uh, that they are foregoing or what they want to see. So I think it's very important that we be mindful of that, and people can be in that stage of development. Okay. And then when we look at the social development and social functioning, identity is a major issue related to social development and social functioning in young adults. Okay, because one of the things, as they continue to grow or to seek things, they have to understand emerging adults depend on their families, depend more on their families than they have in the periods before. And I think we briefly talked about that in class. We talked about why people, what are some ways that are some contributing factors to that. We talked about poor social functioning that has been linked to problems in school and family and adults as adolescents, unstable employment, young adults who do not develop in this area. They may have unstable employment, behavior problems in young adulthood, problems in school, just not functioning as they should at the stage of development that they are. And a lot of times that's linked to when they were younger. Did they have problems in school? How were they with their family as adolescents? Uh, Growing up, did they ever work? Was their employment unstable? Were there behavioral problems? But then we know as professionals that if people have support, contributing factors such as extended education, credentials that require, opportunities to advance and to grow, that these young people are more likely uh, to develop and know who they are and achieve that identity formation, who they are. Social development is very important with when it comes to young adults, because I think we talked about this a little in class, how people still want to be a part of a group. But one thing that I find very interested, even at this stage, they start to develop negotiations about how things, how I'm going to work, how this is going to look for me. And I think that's important that young adults do that. Now, one of the things about social develop, I want to make sure we understand, fallen groups may struggle with transition to young adults. And I think, students with disability, again, all this goes back to connections and how we identify person with severe emotional difficulties and people who have poor relationship with their parents, and also immigrant students. And sometimes are immigrant young adults. They just struggle with that transition from adolescence to emerging adulthood into actually young adulthood. And I think it's important that we recognize that there are programs, there are sources available to help people to have better social connections, and our interaction with people. Okay. Now, I want to give you a term that I don't know if you ever heard before, but it's called fictive kin. And that's FICTIVE, fictive kin. And fictive kin is someone who is non-relative. They're someone who has your back. It could be a coach, it could be a teacher, it could be a neighbor, someone who they're not your kin folks, but they're your folks. Okay. They may be someone that you grew up around. It could be someone you could consider your family. They don't have to be your skin folks or your kin folks. They can actually just be someone that has poured into you. Have been a part of you. You consider them family. Now, what's important about this this is called fictive kin. Make sure you will see this as you begin your professional assessment. You will see people who say, well, this is my godmother, or this is my play mom, or something like this is somebody I can go back to whenever I feel uh, um, like isolated or feel like I need to connect with people. And this may be someone who make sure that the thing that makes fictive kin unique is that they're non-relatives. And so just make sure you understand that. And now, as we move into understanding relationship development, we've talked about a lot of things dealing with young adults. Now we want to make sure that we have a good understanding of how they the journey through life as far as relationship development. Intimacy, okay, is the core of relationships developed during early adulthood. Okay. Listen, at this stage of development, intimacy is the core of the relationship development during early adulthood. Okay. Now, what is intimacy? Some have different beliefs about it and what it is. So for this class and for the record, intimacy is a sense warm of closeness. Okay. It's someone that you feel close to, a sense of being warm and connected with. Okay. There are three different components of oh my goodness, intimacy. Okay. Interdependence with another person, self-disclosure, and affection. Now, as we go into this particular discussion. For those of you who have your book, we can find this being discussed more on page 254 in your book, but it has the different types of intimacy and what they mean. Okay. There are three types: interdependence with another person. You have a relationship, you can engage. It's interdependence, not dependence, but interdependence. Okay. A self-disclosure, how you're able to express yourself and affection. Now, if you hold on for a second, I have this highlighted, but I cannot see it. Okay. Intimacy may take a form of cognitive, intellectual intimacy, emotional, sexual intimacy, physical intimacy, apart from a sexual relationship. So I want you to understand that when you're reflecting on intimate relationships, some people talk about finding their soulmate or feeling intense connected with someone. So it has different forms. Okay. There are tasks. I found this very interesting. um there are different tasks that foster intimacy in relationships. So I want to go back before I move to the two family factors in adolescence are important for young adults ability to have this. Now listen to this. If you know people who have trouble connecting or being intimate in any of those areas I just mentioned, then they may lack some of this, what the factors that says, hey, this person is more likely to develop a strong, uh, healthy, intimate relationship. And that's someone with a positive relationship with their mother. Think about what attachment is. This goes all the way back, from birth and in early childhood. Attachment is so important. But as a individual in adolescence continue to develop, if they don't develop a strong relationship, or not strong, or maybe a positive relationship with their mother, there's a strong possibility that they will have trouble, or it may find it challenging to develop intimacy with someone in a sense of warm, close relationship. And again, this goes back to attachment. Okay. And then another type is the adaptability of the family unit. Do they adapt well? How do they function? Is it dysfunctional family? Was the environment healthy or unhealthy? So all of this plays a role in how that person will be intimate with somebody. Now, you can think about your friends and think about the people that you hang around with and ask yourself, hmm, it's hard to connect with them, or they don't feel close, or things. Then you need to think about the assessment tool would be, I wonder what was the relationship with their mother, because we know that mothers and children has to do with secure attachment, and abandonment issues. So a whole lot of factors go into why a young adult person may not develop intimacy or be able to connect during adulthood. There's good news. The good news is, with social workers like you who have understanding, we can go back and help that individual be what they need to be. Okay. So there is a chart that talks about um, the task. Is exhibit 7.5. And if you get a chance, it's number 7 slide. But this talks about some things that people can do to um, fostering intimacy. Look at some of those. I'm not going to read them to you, but there are some things that you can, an individual can do that can help them develop this relationship. Maybe they didn't have a positive relationship with their mother, but maybe later on in life, uh, they can develop healthier relationship with other people. And so, again, slide number 7. Exhibit 7.5 in your book on page 254 will show you, give you some things that foster those type of relationships. I would encourage you to read over those so that when it's time to have those discussions, you'll be ready for them. Okay. Now we're gonna now let me say this. Intimacy does not mean romantic relationship, but it can. Okay. So we're gonna talk about romantic relationships. And this is a key element in development intimacies during early adulthood. Okay. Again, think of it as connecting dots, how people connect. Um, a lot of times people choose their romantic partners based on lust, attraction, and attachment. See that word attachment goes. Okay, and we're going to break all these down for you. So intimacy is a core part of development, you know, as a young adult. But then when you talk about that romantic development, it's also a key part in developing as a young adult to have intimacy during early adulthood, which can lead into romantic relationships. So, what is romantic love? Okay. A romantic love is a relationship that is sexually oriented, spontaneous, voluntarily, and occurs between equal partners. Okay. Now, intimacy did not necessarily mean sex. Remember, I gotta make sure we understand that. But a romantic love is a relationship that is sexual oriented. It's spontaneous, it's voluntary, and it happens between two equal partners. Okay. And then another part of that relationship is lust. It's a sexual attraction. It is pure sexual attraction. I don't think there's a need to continue to elaborate on that, but it is pure sexual attraction. Okay. And then you have a attraction, and that's a feeling great pleasure in the presence of a romantic interest and thinking of other person all the time. So you have those googly eyes, or you have this attraction to somebody. So it is what it is. You feel a great pleasure just being in their presence, and you're thinking about that person all the time, and you're thinking about them sometimes in the presence of romantic interest. Okay. Now, attachment goes back. Now, I bet you were wondering, my God, Miss Sheila, I didn't know that attachment from the womb and early childhood has to do with young adult. Well, absolutely it does. Attachment says the feeling, attachment is defined as feeling a sense of security when in the presence of attachment figure. Now, as I stated earlier, attachment goes back to childhood. And so, but now this is as an adult, you may find individuals that you may be romantically involved or attracted to or lust, however, but you don't feel attached to them. You don't feel securely a sense of security relationship, or they don't show that. And that may be just because they have not had a chance to experience attachment. So that goes deep. There's some really good stuff here. Okay. And then let's talk about the LGBTQ individuals. They often experience different their experiences are often different from heterosexual couple. Okay. Because they have a different process of coming out the process. Then they have to negotiate their identity with their family, because a lot of times family members may not accept their sexual orientation, or they may not have come out to their parents, so they have different experiences that come with their sexual orientation, okay, versus someone who's heterosexual. Okay. I am the opinion is nobody business someone else sexual orientation. So now we have intimate violence in public health. It's a big health. We've discussed that intimate partner violence. Um, that's intimate terrorism and pattern of coercive control and repeated battering. and which is also known as domestic violence, intimate partner danger. And I think one of you all, we discussed that in our class in your presentation. So we will move on. And again, any of the things that we're discussing right now, you can always send me an email or talk to, but I encourage you to read this. I want us to finish this chapter. Didn't want to leave you without us having some lecture about it. And so now we also, we're looking at parenthood. You remember earlier we were talking about parenthood. You know, as you go through young adulthood, you start thinking about, uh, am I going to be a parent? Do I want to have children? I want marriage, career. So parenthood is defined as an adjustment to parenthood, depends on 5 dimensions. Okay, there are 5 dimensions that we need to look at, and they're on your PowerPoint 9, but I do want to go over them. Individual factors such as how role change affects one's sense of self, how you see yourself, different roles, there's a American always like mothers stay home and raise the children, but now we see that dads are stay-home dads and they raise children too. So those are things that you have to look at. The quality of the partner's relationship. Before you have children, most young adults, think about what is the relationship that I have with my partner? How will this play into how we view parenthood, how we will parent? Then there's the quality relationship between the young adults and the children. you know, Quality of each partner's relationship with his or her family or origin. It's good to check out how people were raised and look at their relationships, because that kind of give you a sneak peek, unless they've done their work, and how they were parent. I like to say this. We all probably say, I'm not going to be nothing like my mom and daddy. I'm not going to raise my children nothing like that. Or I'm not going to be anything like them when I grow up. But you will find yourself, bringing the good, the bad, the nasty, and the ugly into it. So, you need to look at, how was my partner raised? How do they view parenthood? Um, were they detached? Were they healthy family? Were they dysfunctional family? And then you look at those qualities of a relationships from a external point, not yours, but the extended family. That's important, especially if you're going into a relationship. Again, that goes back to fictive kin. Are there people who are fictive kin in that family, and they may view that as possible, and you may come up with, no, it's parenting is my job, my responsibility. But this person may grew up with their teacher being their fictive kin, where they got the attachment. So there's a lot of things you must consider. That's why I always tell you all, make sure you are healthy and that you've done all the work that you need to do so that you can do the work that you're called to do. Okay. So now we're going into mentoring. This is slide number 10. And this talks about young adults can be both mentors and mentees. You're never too old to have someone to look up to or you can learn from. As social workers, you should be committed to lifelong learning. And that means we're open to learn from anyone. And we can mentor and we can be mentees. Okay. Remember the analogy, you can either sponge, so you can soak up all the information, or you can have that concrete type of thinking and you will not grow. Okay. Now, serving as mentors can help young adults move through adult transition. When you help somebody else, younger or older, it helps you to develop some skills that you may not have gained as a emerging adult. Okay. It facilitates new experiences. You get to see others. You learn how to, you develop roles of learning how to take care of others. And it's just a good opportunity to expand your base knowledge. Volunteer is very important. Okay. Now, one of the things, young adults and technology. I'm actually laughing at this. Me explain that. You all know that Miss Neighbors is totally not technical savvy. However, I do know what I know, and I'm open to learn. Um, the current cohort of young adults that are now, they are the first generation of digital natives. They know everything. Even the generation coming up after them, there are, adolescents who know more about technology and computers than I do. I mean, now schools are going to tablets and computers, and it also give them a help them to explore, help them to see different things. But also, this is the way. This is a new way. This is a new way of living. Um, it says that emerging adults engage with media. Get this. Now, you all are emerging adults. Says that you engage with media, whether it's computer, social media, 12 hours a day. There's only 24 hours in a day. So that means half of your time is spent on technology. Now, you remember when we were talking about adolescence and we talked about hot cognition and cold cognition? This is where this comes into play, okay? Um, 12 hours a day, that's a lot. I would encourage you to put this down sometimes and just read, soak up some sun, or do something. Just do not be good 12 hours a day. That's excessive to me. Okay. Non-Hispanic, Black, young adults report lower rates of access to technology. There are some people who don't have access, whether it's based on location. Some rural areas don't have internet, and popular to what people believe, everybody don't have a computer. Not everybody can afford Wi-Fi, and that's what I think that is great about school. They give all students a tablet, and then they all have this. They can connect at school, and some places even have buses that drive around in communities so that students can connect. Even if you think about, there were times way before now that you would never see Wi-Fi code when you go into restaurants, and just start being noticeable. If you go to some popular restaurant, they'll tell you the Wi-Fi code because people are connecting, children are connecting, and this is just the way that we're having to go. Okay. Constant connection. Now get this. Oh, this is a good one. Constant connection changes social relationships. I cannot tell you how often I see young adults out to eat and everybody's on their devices. And so you can tell, like, sometimes people are so engaged in that they're not able to connect with the very people that are in front of them. So there are some plus and minuses of this, but you have to understand that it will change social relationships. And if you already have somebody who has attachment issues and they engage in their phones all the time or their computers, 12-hour plus, and they don't engage with others, can you see how they will have trouble connecting with the individual? So now we go into the work and labor market. I want you to, there's a decline in labor market involvement for young adults because a lot of them are going back to college now. People are going to college. They are not they're not going directly to work. Some of them are going to college. And one of the things I want to point, two things, that the year 2000 to 2010 was known as the lost decade. People were not working, and this was before COVID, y'all. I mean, there were times where people were not working. Um, and it says failure to achieve success in the labor market interferes with young adults' ability to meet other adult transitional markers. So if you're not working or you're not able to hold down a job, it says that this may indicate that there are some adult markers that you will not meet or that you may not meet because of not being able to function in the market. There are some things two words I want you to remember out of here. You have human capital, which is which is defined as talents, skills, intellectual capacity, social development, emotional regulation capacity. human capital is your ability to get a job. Do you have skills? Do you have talents? Do you have cognition, intellectual capability? Are you emotional intelligent? Are you able to maintain your composure under stress? And so, but there's several things that out there that young people, young adults, are more vulnerable to not being right for the labor market. Some have criminal records. Okay, there are some people who have criminal records who may not able to get a job. There may be some who have aged out of foster care, and you know what statistics say about children who age out of foster care. Um, Young adults with physical and mental disabilities. Also, young adults who experience a variety types of childhood adversities. We know that sometimes that may be difficult for them to maintain jobs. So we have to be aware of all these things and understand when that young person may not be able to function in the labor market. But also young adults who had early onset of persistent problems with drinking, alcohol use, or drug use. And we talked about in class how substance abuse can change that. Then you have to look at community access. Um, what type of public infrastructures are there? Or do people have adequate transportation? What is the job market? When you think of big companies coming into an area, they want to know how people are employable. Is there transportation to get them to work? Are there a lot of high school dropouts? What is the alcohol rate? What is the drug addiction rate? Is this community employable? And so, there's a lot of things that has to go into, what are the educational opportunities for young adults? So those human capital and community access are important when you're looking into um, the labor market. Now, there on slide 14, there's a factors and protective factors in young adult. Okay. And as you look at them, let's see what is on page. Uh, it is on page 265, and it gives some common core protective factors in predicting individuals' ability to adapt as an adult. Again, it goes back into infancy. Did you have a close connection? Were you encouraged? Were you loved? Did you receive the emotional and mental support? Did you have a lot of life stressful situations? Um, did you ever, how was your health? How was your temperament? And look over that, and it kind of gives us some ideas about whether or not you will find it easy or challenging. Not that you won't, but it may be challenging factors that prevent you from functioning as a young adult. So here's some risk factors associated with transitioning from a young adult to adult. Low family income during infancy. You didn't have the basic needs. Money was scarce, so you may not have the same opportunities as someone else. And one of the things that it says poor reading achievements by age 10. Now, a lot of people got really upset when students in the third grade had to pass a reading test before they can go on. This is why, because you have some college students or even high school students who have poor reading achievement. They may be able to read, but they can't interpret what they're reading. They can't apply what they're reading. So it says if you have some of the risk factors is that you come from a low income family, your reading score, you have a poor reading score by the age of 10, you have problematic school behaviors during adolescence, and then you have adolescent health problems. According to this research, not Miss Neighbors, but the research says that young adults who experience these type of risk factors are more likely have problem transferred into adulthood, because now this is a young adulthood, so we're still depending on parents. We're still getting some support. Some may be out and not getting support, but there's still, you grown, but you're not grown. Okay. So I just remember that. Okay. And that concludes our lesson on chapter 7. Please review this, listen to this, and then if you have any questions, any concerns, please make sure that you send me send me an email or talk to me, okay? I wish you the best, and make sure you take notes because you will see this information again. Now, one last thing I want to say. The implications for social work, because you remember I said there will be a young adult waiting on you, there will be a young adolescent, there will be someone waiting on you to make sure that you have it. It says apply knowledge of young adulthood to recommend guidelines for social workers to engage, assess, intervention, and evaluation. So that's the purpose of making sure that you all cover this information. Thank you, and I will see you soon.